Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video we have the Game Week 2 preview where we'll be discussing the likes of Quansah, Barco, Son and Nkunku should you be selling them, and also players to buy such as Man City assets, Mbeumo, Mitoma and much more. If you did enjoy today's video, please do smash that like button, and if you are new around here, make sure to subscribe as well. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So guys, let's start with Quansah and Barco, two players that are causing managers a lot of headaches going into Game Week 2. And it's obviously not an ideal situation at the start of the season where you've got defenders that you thought could have high upside across the first 5 to 6 weeks, and now you're potentially needing to sell them going into Game Week 2. So, firstly, now that Quansah has dropped in price, if you've not yet seen, Quansah has dropped in price from 4.5 to 4.4. We can actually predict price changes, by the way, and I'll show you in a second how we do that. But now that Quansah has dropped, and given that Barco is 4 million, I see no good reason now to sell them. So if you've already sold Quansah, great, you didn't eat that price drop, and you haven't lost any money as such. But as of right now, I wouldn't sell them on Wednesday when I upload this. Maybe by Friday you might still decide to do so, and we'll discuss that in a second. But right now, there is absolutely no rush to do so. Obviously, Quansah was subbed off at halftime for Liverpool. I don't think Slot highlighted, in fact, he didn't say Quansah wasn't winning enough duels, but he said we were not winning enough duels as a side, and as a result, I made that substitution and also gave some specific halftime instructions, which basically means that Quansah was not winning enough duels, right? If that's the sub that you make, that's the reason. And Konate is a very dominant centre-back. I think there are definitely qualities that Quansah has that Konate does not. But in terms of physicality and in terms of winning those duels, you can absolutely understand why Slot made that change. And it definitely worked. Konate was very good and they kept the clean sheet. So well done to Slot for having the bravery to go and do that at half-time. But obviously for Quansah owners, that leaves you in a tricky position. Quansah was clearly favoured during pre-season. He was clearly favoured to start the season. But given that Konate was then trusted in the second half, what do we see for the next few games? I've honestly got no idea. I would just say that Quansah could quite comfortably just come back into the starting 11 now, and that could have been a very Ipswich-specific substitution. If Tony was not fit, but if he was starting against Liverpool in Game Week 2, I would bet my house that I don't own that Konate would be the one that would start in Game Week 2 because he is a player that you need a dominant centre-back against. But given that Tony will not be probably starting that game, yeah, you could absolutely see Quansah playing. Like I said, because he's now dropped to 4.4 million, you've basically got to treat Quansah like a 4.0 defender because you can't, unless you've got money in the bank or unless you make 2 transfers, which I wouldn't recommend, you can't sell him for another 4.5 now. So he is essentially a 4 million defender, and therefore you're looking at other 4 million defenders. I'll discuss my favourites in a bit, but there really aren't any that I think it would be worth doing Quansah to. So right now, I think you've basically got to keep him if you haven't already sold him. And he could get really good minutes over the next 5 or 6 weeks. If he starts against Brentford, Quansah sellers all of a sudden are like, right, I shouldn't have overreacted to that and moved so early. So let's wait and see. My natural instinct is that Konate starts Brentford now. And if he plays well again, then maybe he is now the favoured centre-back alongside Van Dijk, which seems very brutal, but I don't think Slot is afraid to do that. On Barco, it's a similar situation where Barco is obviously 4 million. I don't see the value really for me right now in moving from Barco to another 4, unless, of course, you need to start Barco every week. Maybe you've gone for some reason, which I would have never advised, 4 million defenders, and you have to start a 4 million defender every single week. Or maybe you've got someone like a Quansah against Arsenal and you just really don't want to play him. Basically, if you feel like you need to start Barco next week, and you are planning to, and you have to start a defender at that price, then maybe you do look to sell Barco. But outside of that, I would honestly just tuck him second or third sub because most people weren't planning to play him against Man United or Arsenal anyway. And by Game Week 4, all you need is Hinchelwood and or Estepinian to pick up an injury, and maybe Barco is starting. I would just say, as of this morning when I woke up to record this video, there are now rumours going around that Barco may be off to Sevilla on loan for a year, and there are other Spanish clubs looking at him. If that's the case, then obviously you're going to get 0 minutes out of him, but he will get price locked. So there'll be no risk of a price fall, which might be nice for you, but then you've got a player that obviously is absolutely not going to get you any points in FPL. So basically, it's a very kind of cliche and safe answer, but I would just wait for now. Like I said, because Quansah's dropped and because Barco's only 4, I don't see any players that you can move to that would drastically improve your team. So let's wait for the press conferences on Thursday and Friday. And if by Friday you feel like you absolutely need a defender and you need to sell one of the 2 of them, we'll look at potential other defenders that you could move to instead at that cheaper price bracket. lots of people wondering, like, how do we know if players are going to fall in price? And by the way, I'll flash it on screen to show that this isn't hindsight. We were predicting a price change last night. I did tweet it out. So this is a good reason to follow me on Twitter or X, because I did post that Quansah was likely to drop in price, and he did in fact do so. But you can do this for free over on Fantasy Football Hub. So there are two ways to do this. The free way to do it, and I'll just show you here, they basically have a full list of all of the predictions of when players are going to fall in price or rise in price. So if you are new to this, what you essentially are looking for is this little bar here. If they're at minus 100%, it means that they are likely to fall in price. And if they are at positive 100%, it means they are likely to rise in price. These are predictions because FPL do not make it completely clear how price changes happen. So there is a lot of estimation here, but you can see that across their entire span of being on price changes, Fantasy Football Hub have a 97.6% price accuracy, which I think is very, very good. And it's about as good as you're likely to get. So what you can do is you can search by change time. At the moment, no one is likely to change in price as of Wednesday morning, but all you need is for the hourly change to pick up. If more managers start selling the player, then of course by 9-10 p.m. this evening, it may well be the case that players are likely to change in price. Price changes happen at 2:30 a.m. BST or 1:30 a.m. GMT. So it's basically in the early hours of the morning UK time. You can obviously work that out for your own time zone, but that means that there aren't price changes throughout the day, like at various points. There's only 1 point every single day. So you can wait until then and keep checking Fantasy Football Hub. And like I said, this is free. You can also create a watch list or just search for players. So Barco is one we've just discussed. He's at minus 9.9%. So he's nowhere near a price fall. And at the moment, he's not being sold by many managers either. So as of right now, there is no risk of Barco going down to 3.9, but obviously do reassess that over the coming days. Nkunku's another player that people are worried will fall in price. He's only at minus 9%, so Nkunku is not likely to change in price. You can also create a watch list as well just by clicking this button on the right here. That will add players to your watch list and you can keep an eye on them. But as I said, if you get the paid for version, and by the way, you can get 50%, I pointed in the complete wrong direction there, 50% off at the moment if you use the link in the description. It's as little as £3.25 per month. You get access to, look at all these features, by the way, Opta Stats, Fixture Analyzer, Price Changes, Match Center, Points Predictions, and so much more. One of the new features on the My Team tool, where you can sort of plan ahead and look at your team each week, not only do you have the predicted points, but you also have the price changes as well. So you can see on Henderson, it says that he is slowly falling in price in terms of players are transferring him out more than they're transferring him in, but there is absolutely no risk of a price change. You can see that probably my closest player to a price rise is actually Diogo Jota here at 75%. So by all means, check out Fantasy Football Hub. By all means, sign up for the premium membership. Like I said, £3.25 per month. It's like less than a pint of beer, less than a Starbucks, whatever you spend your money on. But also, you can just check it out for free. So I will leave the link down below to get access to price changes for free, which will be the first link, and the second link will be for 50% off. Do check it out. At the very least, just start to keep an eye on it, because it might have been that you wanted to remove Quansah for Robinson, and if you'd have known about the price changes, you might have done it last night. So there we go. Basically, as of right now, with Quansah at 4.4 and Barco at 4.0, I would probably leave it. But if you are looking for defender replacements, here are the ones I'd be looking at. So guys, despite what I said about maybe not needing to sell Quansah and Barco now, I still think there'll be lots of people making defender transfers this week due to issues in their team or mistakes that they've made. And I didn't even mention the fact that Pedro Porro came off at the end of game week 1 due to rolling his ankle. I do think that that didn't look particularly serious, given that after the game he didn't have ice on his ankle. It didn't look particularly swollen. He was walking around on it. So I would imagine that even if he's out for a week, it's not long term. But regardless, I think a lot of people will be looking to make defender transfers. I would still urge you to try and wait until Thursday, Friday, when we have a bit more information from the press conferences. But here are my favourite defenders at each of the price points if you are looking to move now. I have said at the top of this graphic that it does depend on your wildcard horizon. If you're looking to own a player for the remainder of the season, which you wouldn't because you get 2 wildcards, but or at least until like game week 16, 17, you might choose a player that is absolutely nailed to start every week. Whereas if you're looking to wildcard in game week 4, then you only need a defender for 2 weeks, for example. I think a really popular wildcard window will be game week 6. So I would be looking at the very least until game week 5 when you are looking to bring players in. And then I would say probably game week 6 is my favourite early wildcard point. And I think a lot of people will go then. I'm not so sure myself, given the way my team's set up, but I think that will be very popular. So at 4.0, Greaves is absolutely the standout for me as the best £4 million defender, and that's not just because I own him. He looked incredibly dangerous from set pieces. He's absolutely nailed on to start for Ipswich, and from game week 3, the fixtures are very good. Unfortunately, in game week 2, he plays against Man City. So if you need a defender to start in Game Week 2, Greaves is absolutely not the one. But from Game Week 3, I think he's probably the most viable 4.0 defender to start a lot of the time. I actually thought Ipswich were very impressive for 55 minutes of that game, and then they just ran out of steam a little bit. And Liverpool are the best attack in the league. They have been for 3, 4, 5 seasons now, so it's not easy to play against them. But I was very impressed by what I saw. So I love Greaves, but just bear in mind you're not going to play him this week. Mosquera was fantastic from a footballing perspective, a little bit strange outside of that. If you've seen the stuff that Mosquera did in Game Week 1, you'll understand. If not, maybe go and Google it. But I'll look past that and just say that he was very, very impressive. The manager speaking very highly of him. He's a very physical, in more ways than one, centre-back. And I think he'll continue to start for Wolves. The issue you've got with Wolves is that the fixtures absolutely stink over the next few game weeks. And again, if you're looking to wildcard in Game Week 6, there is no week that you really want to play Mosquera, apart from maybe Game Week 3. But most of the other defenders that you have will have a decent fixture in Game Week 3. So Mosquera is probably a no for me, just due to the fixtures. But again, if you're looking to wildcard Game Week 15, 16, 17, much later in the first half of the season, then maybe Mosquera could be an okay shout. If you need a 4.0 defender this week, it has to be Harwood-Bellis. I was very impressed with Southampton, even against 11 men in Game Week 1. I think both Ipswich and Southampton, and obviously to some extent Leicester, I don't think they're going to roll over and just be the immediate 3 teams that get relegated. I mean, they could be, but I was very impressed by all 3 of them at points in Game Week 1, and Southampton in particular looked very strong. Harwood-Bellis is a bit of a threat from set pieces. We saw that in pre-season, and I really like the fixtures. You could conceivably start Harwood-Bellis in every week, bar maybe Game Week 4. You might not want to start him, but even then it's not an awful fixture. So Greaves and Harwood-Bellis, if you need a 4.0 that you're going to start a lot of the time, Mosquera may be longer term, and if you need a defender this week, it would be Harwood-Bellis. At 4.5, you can't look past Anthony Robinson, I don't think, unless you obviously already own him. He's got Leicester this week, then Ipswich, West Ham, Newcastle, Forest. You could actually start him in all of those. He's got quite a bit of attacking threat. I think he was 3rd for expected goal involvement in Game Week 1, so still got forward a fair bit against Manchester United. He had 6 assists last season. And whilst Fulham, I do not think are a good defence, they were 14th for expected goals conceded last season. In Game Week 1, they gave up so many chances to Man United. You're not owning him for the clean sheets. You're hoping for 1 or 2 clean sheets in the first 5, or in the next 5. And then you're hoping for maybe 2 assists. And I think he'll be well worth that price tag. And I think he could absolutely get that. And obviously, if you get the assist and the clean sheet in the same week, you could be looking at a 12-pointer. So I just feel like Robinson has that upside for me. I would be going for him. Lewis Hall, I still think is worth considering. So Fabian Schär was sent off. I believe that's only a 2-match ban in the Prem because he serves one of the 3-game one of the 3 games he will serve in the domestic cup, in the EFL Cup. So it'll actually only be 2 Premier League games he misses, I believe. And as a result, yes, over those 2 games, Newcastle will be defensively weaker because he's arguably their best centre-back. In fact, he is their best centre-back. But what that means is Dan Burn absolutely has to play at centre-back. And the other centre-back position will probably be Emil Kraft. But you also have Lloyd Kelly. If they're sort of rotating in those centre-back roles, you've really only got Lewis Hall now that can play left-back. And clearly Lewis Hall is first-choice left-back at the moment. So I expect him to start the next 3 to 4 games. The only issue is I don't think he was very good in Game Week 1, and a lot of Newcastle fans are saying that they were quite disappointed with his performance. He got booked. He was skinned a couple of times. However, he did make an incredibly impressive goal line clearance, and also they were down to 10 men for large spells, which makes it difficult to analyse how they would be in a more dominant position with 11 players on the pitch. So I think Hall's fine as a pick, but he's definitely second choice after Robinson. And then I just wanted to give a shout out to Rico Lewis as well. I think he's absolutely brilliant as a pick for Game Week 2. I don't know that he's not 100% nailed to start. I would be surprised if he's on the bench though, given how good he has been in the last 2 games for City. The issue is you could play a Kanji in that role and have Gvardiol was the one coming forward. You could play John Stones, who could either slot into, again, that more defensive role with Gvardiol coming forward, or John Stones can play that midfield role. And obviously, if Kyle Walker is fit enough to start, you could absolutely see a world in which he starts. But I think given the opposition and given how good he's been, I think Rico Lewis will start this one. The issue is that he's not a long-term pick. And if you're selling someone like Quansah for Rico Lewis, you're trading one problem for another problem. So I think for Lewis, you've got to understand that maybe if you're in a wildcard Game Week 4, I like him a lot for the next 2. But if you're wildcarding in 6 or beyond, I don't think you're going to get consistent starts out of Lewis, is my opinion on it at the moment. You obviously have the likes of Quansah or Pau Torres at Aston Villa. After Game Week 2, they have a really nice run of fixtures. Leif Davis absolutely deserves a shout out. He had the most final third touches for Ipswich out of any of their players, their attackers or anyone. Leif Davis was getting forward the most. So there are some other really nice 4.5s. Anderson looks good if he does stay at Palace, but for me, it would be Anthony Robinson. And if you already own him and a couple of other premiums, you probably don't need to make a defender transfer this week. For the 5.0s, it's absolutely Munoz and Mitchell for me. I think they were both really impressive in Game Week 1. If you've not seen, Palace essentially play a back three at the moment of Richards, Anderson and Gay. Obviously, if Gay does leave, then they'll either sign another centre-back or play someone like Lerma. And then you've got Munoz and Mitchell basically playing as wing-backs or almost like a left mid and a right mid. And to be honest, Munoz is almost playing as a right winger at points. I absolutely think that if you're looking for increased goal threat, penalty area touches, and someone that's just more involved in the attacks, Munoz will be the best defender at 5.0. But Mitchell is also getting forward a fair amount. And what I think you'll get from Mitchell more than Munoz is probably assists. I'm aware Munoz got the assist in Game Week 1, but Mitchell is just getting into some great crossing positions. And because he probably holds the width slightly more than Munoz to allow Eze to come inside, he'll get into a lot of good crossing positions. And I think Mitchell will get a very good amount of assists this week. And Munoz is very highly owned amongst engaged managers. So if you want to make just a bit of a... I think it's quite a clever play against the field. I don't mind Mitchell. And obviously, if you've already got Munoz, you could double up. But for me, it's Munoz, then Mitchell. I've given a little shout out to Cucurella. He did obviously come off in Game Week 1, and he's been memed as well due to, well, it's his own fault, really, with the song that he was singing. But I still think it will be very good for Chelsea. And I would argue that the sort of role that Maresca is expecting Cucurella to play, no one else can play that for Chelsea. Chilwell clearly isn't in his plans. Yes, they've got Colwill, but I think he'll be favoured at centre-back. So I think Cucurella will be fairly nailed for Chelsea as long as he can stay fit. You do have the likes of Dalot, obviously, if you want to go there, or Maatsen if he does start for Aston Villa coming up. But for me, it's Munoz and Mitchell at 5. So there you go. Greaves, probably the best 4. Robinson, the best 4.5. And then Munoz, the best £5 million defender. So guys, we are going to move on to discussing Christopher Nkunku, but another question that a lot of people asked was around triple captain Haaland. Should you triple captain him this week? Is he a viable option? And he absolutely is. And I'm going to let Praz of the FPL Wire discuss this because I invited him onto my new podcast, FPL Therapy. If you've not yet checked it out, there will be links down below in the description, or you can just search on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple for FPL Therapy. You can listen to it, watch it, make sure to subscribe, make sure to like, make sure to rate 5-star, all of that lovely stuff. But Praz explained on the FPL Therapy podcast that we did yesterday that, in fact, triple captain Haaland in Game Week 2, as scary as that is for me, could be a viable option, and I'll let him explain why. Let's do triple captain Haaland then. So why do you think that needs more discussion?
So what's different this season is, for people who don't know, is we don't have a lot of doubles and blanks because, you know, this Game Week 29 annoying weekend, which has a lot of blanks. This doesn't happen this time where it coincides with the Premier League.
Perfect.
So there's a separate week for that Game Week, that quarterfinal FA Cup. So therefore, fewer doubles, and you have only, as things stand, only 2 windows where you'll have 2 double game weeks this year. We have a chip called Bench Boost, which we like to use in a double game week. We have a chip called a Free Hit, which we also prefer, but we don't have to use it in a double game week. And we have a triple captain. So we have 3 chips, which we like to use in a double, but only 2 weeks. So there is one theory which says Free Hit can be just played in a blank game week. Then you have 2 doubles for your triple captain and your Bench Boost.
Yep.
The thing that complicates it is one mystery chip, the most annoying thing.
Yeah, if you haven't seen, by the way, when the game launched, FPL launched that there's a mystery chip, and we'll find out what that is in December, I think they said.
Correct. So mystery chip could be just faff, and you would have to just play it the next week and you can pick 4 players from any team and you go, okay, I'll just do it randomly any week. Or it could be like a limitless, where you go, I'm going to play it in a double game week because this is exciting.
In which case you've got another chip then to use.
Exactly. Then you have another chip to play in a double game week. And now you think, okay, which am I going to sacrifice? Bench Boost I like for double, definitely. Maybe this mystery chip plays in a double game week. So then triple captain needs to be in a single game week. Then we get into the argument of what is the highest ceiling fixture for the highest ceiling player? That's Haaland home to Ipswich.
So guys, there we have it. Basically, the gist of that is because the FA Cup quarterfinals are going to have their own dedicated weekend, we will not get blanks caused by the FA Cup quarterfinals, which as a result means less double game weeks. So in total, at the moment, we could have as few as 2 double game weeks, but you have possibly 3 or 4 chips to play in those weeks. Therefore, it is probably or potentially going to be the case that we all play our triple captain and or bench boost in a single game week this season. And if you are going to do that, Haaland is an absolutely viable option in game week 2. I think I'm just going to save it just in case. There are always potentially double game weeks that could arise for reasons that we are not aware. And also, the likes of Haaland, Salah will play Ipswich again. They'll also play the likes of Southampton, Leicester, and we'll work out who are the weakest defences. It may well be, and Ipswich fans will probably back this, that they are not the team to target. I don't think they were bad against Liverpool by any means. And also, they are sometimes potentially better away from home, because at home they tend to go for it, whereas away from home they might set up a little bit more defensively. So I just don't feel like we have enough data at the moment for me to consider a triple captain this early. But obviously, I don't have Erling Haaland, so maybe I'm just trying to talk you out of the captaincy. But there we go. Do check out FPL Therapy. Like I said, it'll be linked down below, or just search for it on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple. So, moving on to the player is on your screen, which is Christopher Nkunku. I obviously own him, and yes, I'm very frustrated that he got 1 point. He was my lowest scoring player in Game Week 1. But I just don't think that we can learn too much from that. It was Man City, firstly, a team that dominate the ball, a team that dominate every game pretty much that they play. And they had pretty good control over that game. I wasn't overly impressed by City, by the way, but I wasn't overly impressed by Chelsea. But City just didn't get into the second, third, fourth gear, and maybe they didn't need to. But I didn't feel at any point like City were really struggling and panicking. And I just don't think the game particularly suited Nkunku. When he got on the ball, he couldn't cause them too many problems, and he struggled a little bit. I think all of the attackers at various points were isolated. And obviously, it's not ideal. And this could be a sign of things to come. Maybe he's benched in Game Week 2, or maybe he comes off again for 60 minutes. But I almost need to see that for me to think he's a sell. Because what happened with Chelsea in Game Week 1 against City is they played Enzo Fernandez in the 10, and then they played Caicedo and Lavia as 2 6s, or 2 defensive midfielders. I would be extremely shocked if against Wolves, Palace, Bournemouth, West Ham, and Brighton, they played essentially 3 defensive midfielders in that team. I think one of Lavia or Enzo Fernandez will come out. Caicedo, I think, has got to start. I think probably Enzo Fernandez might be the one to drop out, and they might keep Lavia and Caicedo, which frees up that number 10 role. Now, will Nkunku play as the 10? I've got no idea. Could be Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall, could be Cole Palmer, could be a various number of players, or it could be, like I said, Cole Palmer in the 10, and maybe it's Jackson that comes out, because I was not impressed with Jackson at all, and maybe Nkunku plays as the number 9. Basically, I've got no idea, and I feel weird selling a player that I was so hot on only a week ago. I thought Nkunku was a great option. Selling him because of one performance against arguably the best team in world football, that seems crazy to me when we don't even know where he's going to play in the next game. But equally on the flip side, that might be, you might be saying, yeah, well, when I don't know how many minutes a player's going to get, and I don't know where they're going to play, of course I'm going to sell them. So it really depends on how early you want to move and how aggressive you want to be. But for me, I need more data to make decisions. And it's why I often do roll a transfer in Game Week 2. Because if Christopher Nkunku starts as the 9 against Wolves and scores 2 goals, I can guarantee you're going to regret selling him. And that is absolutely a possibility that he does start as the 9 or the 10. I don't think he'll start on the left, is my prediction in Game Week 2. I think he'll either be on the bench or start as the 10 or the 9, because I just don't think it works as well with him on the left. So I think we'll probably see Cole Palmer on the right. We could see someone like Madueke, Sterling, someone else on the left. It could be a variety of players. And I think we'll see probably Jackson and Nkunku through the centre. But we could, like I said, see Nkunku as the 9 and Dewsbury-Hall as the 10. So let's wait and see. I need to see Chelsea against an opposition that isn't Manchester City for me to understand how they're going to set up. In terms of the data that he managed in Game Week 1, he obviously didn't do a massive amount. He did have a couple of chances, so 0.23 expected goals, 0.06 expected assists. By the way, that's not far off Erling Haaland. So if you're saying Nkunku had a bit of a stinker in Game Week 1, in 58 minutes, he accumulated more than Erling Haaland did in 58 minutes. So it wasn't an awful performance. But he wasn't involved in any big chances. I don't remember off the top of my head any times when I was like, oh, he almost scored. But he did get into the box a little bit. You can see the touch map. There were some touches in the box. So overall, I'm not too stressed about Nkunku. I definitely won't be selling him for Game Week 2 unless we get information that makes us believe that he's not going to start. If I think there's a good chance that he doesn't start in Game Week 2 or we get a leak, then absolutely I'll be looking to move him on. But if I expect to start and I expect that he might be able to move centrally, then yeah, absolutely Christopher Nkunku will be staying for me, and I'm hopeful that it will punish the sellers in Game Week 2. So Heung-min Son had a much more worrying performance in Game Week 1 for me than Nkunku. I know he obviously had 89 minutes, but there were various things that I would be slightly worried about as an owner. But again, I would urge you not to overreact too much and knee-jerk a player out just because they had a disappointing Game Week 1 performance. We've seen so many times that players smash it in Game Week 1 and then continue to blank for the entire season, or they have a really poor Game Week 1 and then score a hat-trick in Game Week 2. So I would urge you to try and exercise patience wherever possible, but it was overall a very disappointing performance. In the things that I were impressed with, he did have a few penalty area touches, which is nice. But outside of that, there was nothing. You can see here he had 0.03 non-penalty expected goals. He did create one big chance. And obviously, if he'd come away with an assist and maybe bonus points, then maybe people are looking at this differently. I heard, I think it was on the FPL they mentioned that maybe Heung-min Son isn't the talisman anymore. And that is my concern, that they needed a goal. And yes, it might have been a bit of fatigue, it might have been game state, but Heung-min Son never normally comes off early when his team needs a goal. And when I say early, it was the 89th minute, but Solanke stayed on the pitch. So I wonder, is Solanke going to be the player that they look to grab them goals and to win them games? And Son's performances last year did leave some to be desired towards the back end. His data was average at best across the season. We know that Sonny is such an exceptional finisher that if he gets a small chance, he may often finish it. I am just worried, and I think my bigger concern with Son is how good Saka and Salah looked in game week 1. Palmer, again, against Manchester City, I'm not taking too much from that. Palmer, I'm sure, will be a fantastic option. But Saka in particular put in an absolute blinder of a performance in game week 1. Not just the data, not just the goal and the assist, but all-around performance was so good. He looked so sharp. Everything that Arsenal did went through Saka. And Son just didn't do that. And the Leicester game in game week 1 was that banker fixture. It was the reason that you chose him. So I do have concerns. My only saving grace here, if you do have Heung-min Son and you want to keep him, is Everton looked appalling in game week 1 for large spells of that game. Maybe that's a little bit harsh, actually. They weren't appalling, but they certainly didn't look as strong as they did last season. I think Branthwaite not being there is a big loss. But also, I just did expect a bit of regression from Everton this season. And maybe that's something we'll see. So I still think Son could be fine to keep for game week 2. But I am going to say now something that I wouldn't usually say, which is I don't mind the idea of selling him if it's for Phil Foden, who has a lot of upside, and we'll discuss him in the final section, or if you just think I made a mistake, I want Bukayo Saka. I understand that. I don't think Bukayo Saka's got a great fixture this week, but could they score against Villa? Yes. And based on what I saw, I'm expecting Saka to be involved in most goals that Arsenal score this season. Well over, I think he'll be involved in 50 to 60% of Arsenal's goals. I could see him involved in maybe more like 40%, but I think Saka is that guy. But I thought that in game week 1, which is why I picked him. So maybe there's some bias. It's difficult to say again because I don't own Son. Given the manager that I am, if I own Son, I would keep him for game week 2. I would give him the Everton game. And in game week 3, I would look to shift the funds to an Ollie Watkins. I would look to downgrade him, or I would look to move to the likes of Saka, or if Foden looks good in game week 2, Foden. Maybe even Cole Palmer, by the way, from game week 3 onwards. The fixtures are very good. So me as a patient manager, I'd keep Son in 2. But for once, which is surprising for me, I don't hate the idea of selling Son in game week 2 if you think that there is upside with Foden, or you want to rectify what you feel was a mistake not going for Bukayo Saka. Or maybe even Salah, by the way, if you can find the extra 2.5 million. So there we go. Let me know down below if you do own Heung-min Son. I do think he's fine to keep, but I also wouldn't mind selling him. So this feels like I'm back into previous seasons, looking at Bryan Mbeumo and Kaoru Mitoma, who both had excellent game week 1 performances. And obviously they scored 9 points for Mbeumo and 8 points for Mitoma. So this is very reactionary to the fact that they scored points. But there are things that I love about both of them. There's things I hate as well. I don't like the fixtures for either, particularly coming up. In game week 2, obviously, Mbeumo's got Liverpool. Game week 2, Mitoma's got United. I think that a good entry point for Mbeumo is game week 3 against Southampton. But then after that, he's got City and Spurs. So it really depends on when are you wildcarding, what is your cover like for him, and are you happy playing him in those difficult fixtures? He is so talismanic, and he is likely to be on penalties in the absence of Tony, that he might score in any given game. And if Brentford do score, you expect Mbeumo to be involved in a similar way to what I just said with Saka. But I still feel like game week 6 wildcarders will be the best entry point for Mbeumo. But I also don't mind game week 3. As I just said, the thing that is great about Mbeumo is because Tony looks likely to be off to Saudi Arabia or to another team, I think Mbeumo will be on penalties for Brentford because he's a great penalty taker. And I also think he'll be involved in a large percentage of their goals. So I really like Bryan Mbeumo. It's pretty much just the fixtures that's putting me off. With Mitoma, game week 2 is actually not a bad fixture against Man United. I know they looked impressive in game week 1, but I wouldn't take too much from that. I also thought that Fulham were pretty toothless in their attack. So I don't mind the entry point in game week 2, but again, you're not going to want to play him in game week 3. So unless you've got some players such as Rodgers against Leicester in game week 3, unless you've got someone like that you can rotate in, I think the entry point for Kaoru Mitoma is probably game week 4 when they've got Ipswich and Forest at home. So I like both of them. I'm just not sure that this is the week to necessarily target them. In terms of their data in Game Week 1, Mbeumo actually wasn't that great from a goal threat perspective, only 0.08 XG, so he didn't really get any big chances himself. But he did create a big chance, and he obviously did score a goal as well. And he is, I think, a very decent finisher, and he does just find a way to create and gather big chances himself. So I absolutely think that Mbeumo will be fine, but his data in Game Week 1 wasn't anything to write home about. In terms of insane data, Mitoma had the highest expected goals of any player in Game Week 1 with 1.12. He had the second, or I think it was the third actually, highest expected goal involvement behind Bruno Fernandes and Souček. So overall, Mitoma had a lot of goals for it. He did have one massive chance, which was like 0.85 XG. But even outside of that, then, he still accumulated a decent 0.3 or so expected goals. So I think he's great. Did I overlook Mitoma in Game Week 1? Absolutely, but it was more so the fixtures of Everton defensively last season were pretty decent, and then he goes into United and Arsenal. But absolutely for me, from Game Week 4, for Ipswich and Forest, if Brighton continue to look good, let's say they put a couple of goals past United, they score against Arsenal, I will absolutely be eyeing up something like maybe Nkunku to Mitoma in Game Week 4. But for now, I just target fixtures so much that I can't bring myself to transfer in a player like Mitoma for United and Arsenal. So there we go. I absolutely think both will be viable. I think both will be in our consideration this season. But entry points for me is better for Mbeumo in 3 or 6 and for Mitoma in Game Week 4. So guys, the final section is just looking at Manchester City assets because obviously they've got Ipswich this week. Then they go into West Ham away after that and Brentford at home. So it's a decent 3 fixtures in a row for Man City. But I also think, again, I don't think Ipswich will be rollovers. I know that Liverpool had the most shots in the box and the most big chances in Game Week 1. So I'm not saying, it's not copium for me not owning Haaland. I'm not saying that City can't put 5, 6, 7, 8 goals past them. But do not be surprised if Ipswich also put in a very good performance where City do struggle to break them down. I think, and this sounds like an obvious point, when that first goal is scored for City will decide the game. If City score in the opening 5 minutes, I think this could be 7 or 8-0. Because Ipswich at that point can't just defend for the rest of the game. They have to at some point go for it. If it gets to half-time like it did with Liverpool and Ipswich are still keeping them out or it's down to 1-0 and they conceded in like the 40th minute, I could see this play out where City just decide to control the game and win 1 or 2-0, 3-0, something like that. So I think it's going to be incredibly important when that first goal goes in. So if you're a Haaland triple captain or if you want to bring in a City asset, you are wanting there to be a goal, I think, in the opening 10 to 15. And then the floodgates could open at that point. In terms of how this table is structured, I've basically got the 6 players that I would be considering outside of Haaland. You don't need me to sit here and tell you that Haaland is the best player in FPL, period, but also specifically for Game Week 2. So I've got KDB, Foden, Bernardo, Doku, Gvardiol, Lewis. You could look at someone like Diaz or Kanji, but for me it would be these 6. And I've just got them sorted by their price. So KDB and Foden at 9.5, Bernardo and Doku at 6.5. So if you're looking for a premium to replace someone like Heung-min Son, you've got those 2. Bernardo and Doku, if you're looking for someone to maybe replace Nkunku with. And then you've got Gvardiol. Maybe you've got Pedro Porro and some money in the bank and he is injured. Or Rico Lewis as, like I said, a potential 4.5 defender. And in this table, I've got their starts in the 23-24 season, their non-penalty expected goal involvement per 90 in the 23-24 season, and then also their non-penalty expected goal involvement per 90 in Game Week 1 of this season. Their projected points from Game Week 2 to 5 according to Fantasy Football Hub. Like I said, there is a link down below to get those points predictions and much, much more. And then that final column is how likely I think they are to start in Game Week 2. I wouldn't even say take it with a pinch of salt. I'd say ignore it, in all honesty. Trying to predict Man City is a minefield. I get it wrong like every week. And I would hold my hands up. I wouldn't ever give you false information. I've got no idea who starts for City in a given week. But this is my prediction in case it is helpful for you. So in terms of attacking threat in Game Week 1, Chelsea largely kept them at bay. The best attacking data was Bernardo Silva with 0.4. So none of them had particularly good goal threat or assist threat. KDB struggled to create too much himself. Foden in his 45 minutes had absolutely no effect on the game in terms of goal and assist threat. Doku did a little bit, but it was more so just taking on his player and then fluffing the end product, which we've seen from him quite a few times. And then Gvardiol and Lewis. Gvardiol was playing as a centre-back and he had more goal and assist threat than Rico. Rico Lewis had 0.01. He was so impressive. If you watched the game, it felt like Lewis was this massive attacking threat. But he didn't create any chances and he didn't really get any goal-scoring opportunities himself. So maybe Lewis is a fantastic player, a bit similar to Mazraoui. I thought Mazraoui was great against Fulham, but he didn't really get any opportunities to get you attacking returns. So maybe Lewis will continue to be like that, and maybe it makes him a slightly weaker option. But I also just think that Chelsea did keep Man City at bay for large spells. As bad as they were going forward, and I think they were, they also did keep City from creating too many clear-cut chances. So I don't think there's too much to take away from that Game Week 1 performance. Ipswich are going to be a completely different opposition to Chelsea. In terms of if you're bringing these players in slightly longer term, i.e. you're not just looking at Game Week 2, I absolutely think Gvardiol is the most safe defender to bring in, and he would be who I'd be looking at if you want them beyond Game Week 2. In terms of attackers that I think are safest for minutes, I've got no idea. Once Foden is fit enough to start pretty much every week, I think that he will have a very important part to play, and I think his minutes will be slightly more secure than KDB. But you have to remember, he's only played 45 minutes, so his minutes aren't secure yet, and he's still not fully up to speed. And we know that Pep will happily slowly reintroduce players. So I would be slightly concerned right now if you're moving to Foden to own in the long term that he could start Ipswich and then be benched against West Ham. KDB, on the other hand, does seem to be a little bit fitter given that he's had a much longer preseason, but he's had more preseason minutes. So I would feel more comfortable that KDB over the next 1 or 2 gets more minutes than Foden, but beyond that, I think Foden's minutes seem slightly more secure. But it's just guesswork. KDB could absolutely be benched against Ipswich and then start against West Ham. I've got no idea. There are so many players that they can play instead. They're also looking very, very likely to go back and sign İlkay Gündoğan. If they do that, then it's another player that can play both the KDB and Foden role in midfield, or he can play more of that Kovacic-Rodri role if he wanted to instead. Gündoğan is so flexible in the positions that he can play, it creates another piece of competition for them. But yeah, as you can see here, I think KDB is 80% likely to start Game Week 2. It's just a number I've plucked from the air. I think Foden's slightly less likely. I think Foden starting depends on Grealish's availability. I think you could see Grealish start, but he's also had 0 minutes in Game Week 1. But if Grealish started on the left and Doku started on the right, yes, Foden could play centrally, but then you could also have KDB and Bernardo Silva centrally with Kovacic in there as well. So I think there is a world in which Foden doesn't start. But if Grealish's fitness is bad and Pep doesn't think he can start, which may well be the case, I'd probably bump Foden up to like 80-85%. I will just say, remember last season we said Foden isn't great on the wings, where you really want Foden is central. I don't think Foden will be central against Ipswich. I think he'll be one of the players maintaining width, and he can absolutely return from the wing. We've seen some incredible performances from the wing for him, but you're not probably going to get a central Foden against Ipswich, at least not for 90 minutes. He might if certain players come off drift more centrally, but yeah, as of right now, I think Foden is very likely to start on the left wing or the right wing, I suppose, for Man City, and I think Doku will be on the alternate wing. So Doku, for me, is slightly safer than Foden, but as I just said, you could see Grealish start, and if you see Grealish start, well, Foden could be on the other wing, and it could be Doku that misses out. So I've got no idea, basically, but I think that both Foden and Doku would be my likely wingers that will start for Man City as of Wednesday in Game Week 2. I think Bernardo's minutes are slightly more secure, especially with Rodri not available. I just think he trusts Bernardo to do the dirty work. And Bernardo Silva was man of the match in Game Week 1. I think he was absolutely excellent, along with Kovacic, by the way. But Bernardo Silva put in a brilliant performance. He obviously got the assist as well. So I've put Bernardo at 85% simply because I just think that there aren't many players that Pep will trust to do that role. And when certain players come off the pitch or he needs some rotation, Bernardo Silva can play in the pivot now. He can play as the 10 on the right. He's very, very comfortable all over the pitch, and I think he exerts a lot of control. And in a game where City are going to want so much of the ball, I expect Bernardo Silva to start. He does play a slightly deeper role without Rodri in the team, so that's not ideal from an FPL perspective, but you can see he still did get forward enough. So I think Bernardo Silva's great, and I expect him to start again. And then for the defenders, I think Gvardiol's the most likely player to start for City out of all of these options, but they can absolutely play Ake. And the reason that I think Ake is more likely to start at the moment than not is mainly because Gvardiol is playing as a left centre-back with Lewis in the team. If Gvardiol was playing his left wing role or left central midfield where he's the one attacking, I think his likelihood of a start is much higher because I don't think anyone can play that role as well on the left. But if all you are needing from Gvardiol is for him to sit there as a left centre-back and Rico Lewis is the one that bombs on, well, Akanji can do that role, Stones can do that role, Diaz could do that role on the left, Ake could do that role on the left. I mean, even Bernardo Silva could do that role on the left because they're not going to be defending that much. All you need that left centre-back to do is sit there and pass the ball. So if there is a fixture that he wanted to rest Gvardiol, this isn't an awful one to do it, but that's not me fear-mongering or scaremongering. I would absolutely start him if I had him, and I think he's fine to bring in I think there's a 90% chance he starts. But the reason that he's not at 100% is because I don't think that left centre-back role is too difficult to play in a fixture like this. And then Lewis, people might be surprised that he's down at 70%. I still think he's very likely to start. But again, there are so many other players that City could play, and there are other systems that they could go for, where instead it's the right-sided player that slots into centre-back, and it is Gvardiol that bombs on and becomes the more attacking player. So Lewis, I think, is fine to bring in. But long term, as you can see by his projected minutes over at Fantasy Football Hub, beyond Game Week 2, I'm not so sure that he continues to start because you do have Walker in there. Like I said, he could play a back three of like Walker, Diaz, Stones, or Walker, Akanji, Diaz, or there are so many variations with Gvardiol being the one that bombs forward. So I would just have concerns beyond Game Week 2 about Lewis. So if it's a short-term punt you need, and then after Game Week 2 you can bench him, I'd absolutely go for it. Other than that, I probably wouldn't move unless you just want to take the risk. By the way, there is a world in which Lewis just continues to be the first choice right back because he has been so impressive. But I just think Pep trusts Walker enough. There are some small rumours that Walker could be leaving City. They're very, very small. If that happens, then all of a sudden we look at Lewis and think he could be the starting right back for 4.5. So it might be a risk that you want to take. Probably not for me. But yeah, those are my thoughts on City assets. In terms of who I'd be looking to bring in this week, if I was bringing in a 6.5, I still think I'd be willing to take the risk on Doku because I think his attacking threat and goal threat will be slightly higher than Bernardo Silva in a given game week. I still think Foden and KDB are fine to bring in. I expect both to start. And in terms of defenders, short-term Lewis is fine. Long-term, I'd go for Gvardiol. Let me know down below, are you going to own any City players outside of Haaland? And how scared should I be that I don't own Haaland for Game Week 2? So guys, there you have it. That is my Game Week 2 preview. Hopefully it was helpful for you. And if it was, please do smash that like button and make sure to subscribe as well. I do really appreciate it. We're on the road to 130,000 subscribers and I would absolutely love your help. As I said, please do check out not only Fantasy Football Hub, links down below in the description, but also my new podcast, FPL Therapy. The links for that will be down below as well. Thank you very much for watching. Until next time, bye-bye.